This is episode 24 with New York Times bestselling author and entrepreneur John David Mann. Hello and welcome to another episode of the UV Effect podcast. Thank you again for joining me. If you have come back for more, and if you're new here, welcome. Today's special guest is a man by the name of John David Mann. He is a best-selling author, and he has written a lot of books. As you will hear in this interview today, he has written over 20 books, and he's a very accomplished writer in the sense that his books are very acclaimed, and he has multiple New York Times bestselling and best-selling books. So, he is incredible. One of my favorite books by him, and you guys might have heard of it, The Go-Giver. It's an incredible story. I definitely recommend that you guys check out that book. I love that one. And I actually did an interview with him as well as his co-author of that book a year or so back on another show that I had called Excel with Gabrielle. That was part of, Excel Youth Mentoring Institute. You guys might know about that. That's the mentoring institute I have for young entrepreneurs. But I had a show that I did called Excel with Gabrielle, and I actually interviewed both the authors of The Go-Giver, Mr. John David Mann, as well as Bob Berg. And my interview with Mr. John David Mann was incredible. I just loved talking to him and hearing his views. He's very insightful, very motivational, and I just feel like he has so many nuggets. He has so many principles. He has so many little inspirations and little things that just need to be heard, that we just need to know and that we maybe don't know and we need to be reminded of. And this interview does the same thing when it comes to this conversation. He shares so many great pieces of advice for authors, for entrepreneurs, and really when it came to just his own life. He talks about his new book that he just came out with, The Recipe, and this book is a little bit different for him because he actually self-published it. Normally, with all the other books that he's written, it's usually published by a company or by a publisher. But this time around, as you'll hear in this interview, he had a bit of some trouble getting this book out there into the hands of publishers, and so he decided that he was going to publish it himself. And I think that's really inspiring because I know we all find ourselves in situations where not everybody is being able to see our vision. Not everybody can get what we're trying to, come across to the world, what we're trying to bring to the world. And so sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and decide, all right, if nobody else sees it, I'll have to make them see it. And so that's just so inspiring. And we talk about that in this interview. We talk about so much more. We talk about what the book is about. We talk about his struggles and also his advice that he gives for authors, and he gives for even for himself as he's been in this industry for a multitude of years, and the struggles that he's faced, but as well as how he allows himself to stand out as an author and what he does to be a great author and to be recognized and to have countless best-selling books and to work with other incredible people when it comes to co-authoring multiple different books. Even this book here, The Recipe, is co-authored by an incredible chef. But he co-authors, and he just talks about what it's like to work with other people and to be able to get to understand them and understand their unique value, and how it helps him to really be able to understand other people, but also to help him better understand himself when it comes to writing and just him in general. He talks about how great writing can be for the mind and how much he loves it and how it really allows him to just kind of get a better understanding of himself and just be able to express himself on a page. But anyway, this is a fantastic interview. So many things. I keep listing things because we did talk about a lot. But it also would be so helpful to, I think anybody can really relate to something that was said in this interview. I definitely did. I pulled a lot from this conversation with him, and I am sure you will as well. So make sure you take out your notepads and your pen, and be sure to play this thing on replay if you have to, but because it was a fantastic interview. But without further ado, let us not wait no more, and let us jump into this episode of the UV Effect podcast with John David Mann. Let's go. Mr. John, thank you so much for joining me.
It's fantastic to be here again.
Yes, I mean, I did an interview with you a few years ago on another show that I had, and that interview was great. I'll probably link it so you can check it out for my audience. But it was such a wonderful interview, and I enjoyed our conversation and what we talked about. And so I'm excited now to bring you back onto another show that I'm having here, the UV Effect podcast. Talk about your story as well as your new book, The Recipe. But before we get into your book, I do want to start off with a bit about you and your life, I guess I can say. You have a pretty impressive repertoire when it comes to your authorship and the books that you've written, that you've co-written. You have so many, but I've looked at your bio and seeing the list of books that are number one, best-selling. You have numerous best-selling books. You have critically acclaimed books, and you've co-authored and authored a number of books. Can you tell us how many books you've actually written?
1 million.
1 million.
No, not that many. It feels like it sometimes.
Yeah.
It's about 2 dozen.
Wow.
Books. I did a little ghost writing in other books here and there that don't appear in my list. But it's 2 dozen. So this is about the 24th, something like that, book.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, of course, it's your career. It's what you do for your life. You write books and you co-write, you author, and what is it, 24 books? That is a lot of books to write, and a lot of them are really fantastic. The stories and the advice and just all the little tidbits and nuggets that you can pull from them. I've not read them all, of course, and
they're all really different. I mean, yeah. It's a range. It's a kind of a crazy menagerie of different topics there. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you can be able to pull from your mind in so many different ways and to create so many different stories and so many different messages. Just from one mind, which is your own. Have you always had a love for writing, or was that something that developed?
I guess I have, actually. It's funny because I haven't always been a writer. I mean, this is kind of late in my life that I've come to this career. I did a lot of other things first. I mean, I started out as a classical musician. Right. I played the cello. I was a composer. I was an educator. I started a school. I was involved in nutrition and wellness and was very involved in that for many years. I got involved in business and direct selling and so it's like I've kind of jumped from career to career like stepping stones across a river. I'm not sure what the river is I'm crossing, my life, I guess. Right. So this whole thing of writing books, I've only been doing this for about a decade, a little more than a decade, about 2004, 2005. Yeah, I really started. So you asked if I always had a thing about writing. I've always enjoyed words. I've always loved reading. I've always kind of liked to write. I never thought of that being a career until pretty recently. But yeah, I've always been kind of intrigued with that. And it's like composing in a way, too, which I was doing from an early age.
And actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because in the other interview that I had done with you years ago, you talked about how you're never the person that just kind of like had the complete idea of your life. Like you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do. You just tried different things. Whereas most people were like, or most people would think like, oh, if I have this one talent, whatever, I will just continue with this talent. Whereas with you, it was just like, I'll try this. Now I'm going to do this. And now I'm going to do that. And it was all over, but it was still things that you love to do. And I looked at your story and I kind of like looking back at that and hearing about, your life. It really works. It really kind of falls in line with what the message is with UV Effect podcast and what we talk about when it comes to unique value. And that is that you have different gifts and different abilities that are unique to you and that have allowed you to kind of put them into different talents and put them into different skills and do fantastic things with your life.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you bring it up that way because I wouldn't say that some of the things that I've done as a career weren't necessarily things that I was particularly gifted at or talented at or that I came to naturally. I mean, I spent a lot of years in business and in building a sales team, and I am it's like not my skill set at all. Uh-huh. I don't think business and sales and that just. But writing is a skill set. But the thing about unique value that you talk about is that where that's especially relevant for me is that I've done so many books with other people. Most of my books have been co-authored with others, and a big part of the process is kind of understanding them, figuring out who they are, and almost like taking them on as if I were getting ready to play a role in a movie, and I'm studying Gandhi or Lincoln or Ray Kroc or whatever. I'm going to go play that part. It's like when I co-author with Brandon Webb, the SEAL sniper, or Chef Charles, the chef, or whomever, it's like I become friends with that person. We talk a lot, and I have to figure out not just intellectually, but on a heart level and on every level, who they are, what's their unique value, because I have to sort of channel that, write as that, sort of become that. So I get to live a lot of other lives vicariously.
And I do like that you said that you had to kind of get an idea of their unique value in order to really speak for them and to be able to translate, their message and to be, to be a part of it. I like that because I think that a big part of being able to connect with people in this world is to be able to connect with what makes them, what makes them unique, what makes them so important. And that way you can really be able to look at someone and see their value. And then that also helps you to even see what value you have in yourself, because it's like you are getting a better understanding of how people work and how there are these little bugs, these little skills, these little gifts that we all have within us. And, when they can work together to form something even better when we can see it in each other and then, grow, which is, I think that's something that's really fantastic about being an author and the way that you do, where you work with other people constantly, because you just have, your life is really about getting to know people and getting to know them on a deeper level. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and you're right too. You said that in doing that, you find out a little bit more about yourself and your own value too. There's this wonderful thing that the writer Joan Didion once wrote. She says, "I write to find out what I think." And it sounds funny because you'd think it would be the other way around, right? You would know what you think and then you'd go write it down. But anybody who's done any teaching or public speaking, or even speaking in front of small groups, you've experienced this, right? You're standing up, you're talking, and as you're talking, unless you're going from a script, right? But as you're talking, if it's all free flow, you hear the words coming out of your mouth, and you go, "Whoa, that's a good idea. I didn't know I knew that, or I didn't know I thought that." That happens to me a lot in writing, where if it's nonfiction, like I'm writing, a book about business or whatever, or it's got a fictional aspect like the Go-Giver books or like this book, The Recipe. Either way, I'll be writing and I'll discover things. Like a character will start to emerge from the page, and I go, "I didn't know who that person was, but now I sort of do." Or I'll be writing about a principle, and I'll I'll say this thing about how this principle works, and I go, I must have known that, but I never really thought that before. I never really had that articulated. And I think that's, you don't have to be an author, a published author, to be a writer, because these days everybody writes. We're all writing emails or texts or blog posts or whatever. Even those of us who don't have a big public following, we're all writing. And I think writing can be a great process of self-discovery too.
I agree with that. I look at that like in the sense of like journaling and things like that, where people do these things in order to kind of, I say, almost talk to yourself. It's like, you're not necessarily crazy for talking to yourself, but like when I journal and write things down, it's like I'm talking to myself and trying to get a better insight of my mind, because sometimes if I try to just think, what am I thinking right now? How do I feel right now? Things just kind of get jumbled and confused. But when I kind of put it down on paper and start writing down the ideas that are popping in my mind, and then things are just kind of flowing out onto the paper, it's like I'm being able to talk to myself and kind of getting an idea of how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, what I'm thinking about right now in this moment. It's really like, I guess you could call it therapeutic, but it also, I think it's an interesting way of getting to know yourself, I guess.
Do you mind if I go off on that for a second? Yeah. There's this you talk about talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. Something that I did many years ago, back in the 1980s, when I was sort of first getting very involved in the whole world of self-development and leadership development and that whole kind of personal growth area. Yeah. One of the first things I learned to do was to talk out loud, speak my thoughts out loud, to my train of thought. I mean, I don't do this walking down the street because that would be weird. But in the comfort of my own room, or in my own office at home, my own living room, bedroom, whatever, I'd start saying out loud what I'm telling myself. And it's funny because we all talk to ourselves. Often we don't even know it. We're not even aware of it necessarily. But we have this running dialogue with ourselves. We all do. Everybody does. It's part of being a human being. Maybe cats and dogs do too. I think they do. But anyway, certainly humans do. And hearing myself talk out loud was a revelation in many ways, because I discovered how much negative self-talk I had going in my head. John, you have no idea how to do this. Or, John, you're totally lost in the weeds. Or, John, this is like, you are clueless. And I'm trying to write something. I have no idea how to write it. I hear these words coming out. I go, wow, do I really think that? And it's only when you become aware of the conversation that you start to have the ability to change the conversation. And I bring that up because when I was working with my friend Brandon Webb, the Navy SEAL sniper, he was tapped to revamp the Navy SEAL sniper training program. And so he was in charge, he and a buddy, Eric Davis, the two of them were in charge of restructuring, reformulating the entire Navy SEAL sniper training program, arguably the hardest and best in the world, right? And Brandon says that the single most significant innovation he brought to the program was a program of mental management that involved self-talk and self sort of affirmation and visualization, that whole area. This is not airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. Like Navy SEAL snipers are trained in this stuff, so it doesn't get any more down to earth and real than that. So I think writing is just like that. It's like talking to yourself out loud. You just get to hear what you think. You get to find out a little bit more about who you are. It's just that, if you're a blogger or an author, you share it. You're like Jeff Dunham on stage talking to himself with puppets.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. and so I actually want to continue with that because I look at like your work. So you work and you're an author and you get this opportunity, this incredible opportunity to be able to connect with other people, then but also to connect with yourself. But with that, there is a level of there's a level of self that's put into your work. I mean, it's probably a huge level of self that's put into your work where you are very, very connected with everything that you're putting on that page. I mean, it's an art form. It's your way of expression. And you do that, of course, as a living to make money, but you also do it because it's something that you love to do and that you enjoy. And so when you're creating and you're writing these books and you're putting them out there, I think I'm guessing it can be a little nerve-wracking to put it there and not be sure if people are going to receive it. I know I do, I make jewelry, so even when I'm putting my creations out there, I'm nervous that people don't really see what I'm seeing.
Totally.
How do you kind of get through that? And we're going to talk a little more about that, but just let me know about like kind of that process for you and trying to put yourself out there.
Now, it's funny because I mean, part of it is that, I'm not, what I do is not like being a stage performer. I've been a stage performer, so I know that world. Although with classical music, it's sort of halfway because you're not making the music up. It's not like jazz.
Right.
I'm up there on the stage to some extent. I'm raw and live with the people, but then also at the same time, I'm playing notes that Bach wrote, a few hundred years ago. So, but as an author, I have the opportunity to improve and refine and revise and make the draft, as perfect as I can before anybody else in the world's going to read it. But there's also the inside story of when you're drafting something, how soon do you show it to people, to your close circle of readers, to your spouse, to your editor, to your agent, and I am not as nervous as I used to be, but still pretty nervous because you never know. I mean, it's very, you're right. It's very vulnerable. It's I'm sure it's the same with jewelry. You know what else it's like? It's like having children.
Yeah.
Because you have this kid and it's there's a lot of your own DNA in that person, and it's like that with the book. Even if it's about Brandon's life as a sniper, there's a lot of my DNA in it because a lot of my thoughts, my feelings, my experience gets into it. That's you said that, and you're so right. I leak into every book I write. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of putting yourself out there, and it is scary. I mean, in this case, I'm launching a business. Because we're self-publishing this book, so that's like a whole nother level of terrifyingness.
And I want to get into that right now too, because you recently you published a new book, right? The book, the recipe. You co-authored this book. Who was it by? Who did you also co-author it with again?
My co-author is Chef Charles Carroll, who is an award-winning executive chef, Olympic gold medalist chef, amazing guy, and so yeah, it was like writing with the Navy SEAL sniper of the chef world.
That's incredible. Okay, so that's
that level.
Right. So you both went out here and you self-published this book, but what was kind of different for you was that you don't normally self-publish your books.
Right.
You know, you have your books, you write them, and then someone else, some other company, some other publisher publishes them for you. But this situation was a bit different for you because, you know, as you were talking about before, you know, you created this book, you co-authored this book, and you put yourself into it, and it's scary to, you know, have rejection. And you did face that with this book. I believe it was over 40 publishers that, you know, I said that and I'm like, oh, I don't even want to say that. It's like, oh, that has, I mean, that's, I can't imagine, you know, that kind of, that had to be like very troubling just to constantly be facing that kind of rejection with the book that you wrote. But you still decided that after the constant rejection, you were like, you know what? I'm going to still put this out here. I'm going to figure out my own way of getting it out into the world. And so you self-published. I want to know what told you to move forward even after that rejection, the constant rejection, and what like kind of gave you that courage to be like, all right, let's do it anyway.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because just to put that in context, you know, about 10 years ago, or a little more than that actually now. Bob Berg and I wrote The Go-Giver. We had a manuscript and we had an agent, right? And we took it to New York and the agent was very excited about it. And this is the beginning of my career as a writer. And it was turned down by 12 or 13 or so. About a dozen publishers said, nah, we'll pass. And, you know, that was rejection, and we were surprised, but both of us had, you know, we were grown-ups, we'd been around the block, we'd suffered rejection in our business lives and so forth, so, you know, it's like we weren't going to quit. But the agent took it back and said, you know, I've got a lot of comments that tell me that maybe it needs some revision. And Gabrielle, I'll tell you what, if one of those 12 had said yes and published it, you probably would never have heard of it. Because it never would have gotten much circulation because it wasn't ready. It would have been a book published before its time. It was, to be frank, not a great book. There was a great book in there, but it still had a lot of dirt and dust and gravel on it. We hadn't finished excavating it, you know. So we took it back for 9 months and we revised like crazy. If you could just see the manuscript on my blog about a year ago, I published actually the first page with all the changes we made it in. It was enormous. There wasn't a page that wasn't covered with red ink. We took a lot out. We took the last chapter off completely and wrote a brand new one. We took a character whose name was Raphael, and we gave him a gender reassignment, and he became Rachel. We changed a lot in the book. And then we took it back to New York, and 12 more people said no. And then someone said yes. Adrian Zackheim, Portfolio Publishing. We're still with him 10 years later. Next spring, we're going to publish our next in the series of the Go-Giver books. And it's over 500,000 copies sold. I mean, it worked. Yeah. But after all this rejection first. So now fast forward to The Recipe, this book. I wrote the recipe with Chef Charles, gave it to my agent, and she emailed back screaming, like, this is the best writing you've ever done. This is great. This is going to be amazing. We're going to take it to New York and get like a 7-figure advance. And that did not happen. So we took it to New York, and, you know, the 12 or 13 publishers said no. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is where the next one says yes. And then 12 more said no. Yeah. I'm like, all right, 24 no's. Okay, then the next yes is right around the corner. 22, 28, 30, 36. Oh, we had 40. You're like, we're not getting a yes. And I have had other projects that never made it to publication. I hadn't written the whole thing, but, you know, written a few chapters in a proposal, and we never succeeded in selling it. I've got a couple of books that I thought would have been really neat books, but they never made it. And that was okay, but not this one. This one, Charles and I couldn't imagine not getting this out to the world. And this goes to your question. So what made us go ahead with it? Because self-publishing for us is really, really a risky thing. Neither of us have time. We're both insanely busy with what we do. Neither of us has the skill set or the expertise or the experience. So, of course, we're doing it. And the reason is that I'm just in love with this book. I mean, this is a book. We gave it to a circle of early readers, maybe a dozen, 15 readers, and they were just in love with it. One of them said, I can't wait till this is out because I'm going to buy a case because I want to give it to all my friends for Christmas. When you hear that, it tells you, okay, they're not just saying it's nice, they're saying this needs to be out there. And so we decided that we were going to, our circle of early readers expanded to 175. We got about 175 early readers before it was published with the book. And the response we got was just so huge. People were so moved by the book. A lot of people cried. A lot of people laughed. Everybody said, I'm a better cook for it. And, who doesn't love food, right? So, we felt it had to be done.
Like, especially with that last part saying that, you had all these early readers, and basically every one of them had beyond positive reviews, that they were moved by it, and that it really, it affected them, that you saw and you heard with what they were saying, that they truly loved this book as much as you did. And something like that has to be kind of reaffirming, right? And that's why you decided to go ahead and publish it. I want to talk more about what your book is about in a second, but I kind of want to talk a little bit more about how you said before how with The Go-Giver, you did have that rejection, and then someone told you to revise it. There were some edits, and you had changed it up, and eventually you did get a yes. With this one, you got all these no's, and so and now you're deciding, let's go ahead and move forward with it, and then of course having all the great feedback that you had from the early readers. There are similarities in the stories, but then there's also in that sense where there's a big difference where on one end there was a person that said, here's what needs to be revised, and on this end it was a multitude of people that were saying it's perfect. My question is, especially for any authors that are listening to this right now, is how do you decide between, especially with having these different kinds of experiences, if a book is, someone's just saying, oh, it's great, or, should it be revised, should it be put out? How do you not get confused with, different thoughts and different opinions? How do you kind of clear off all the ideas, and then also take in all the views and concepts in order to make a decision like self-publishing or shelving it?
Yes, this is such a great question. And honestly, it applies not just to writing a book. It very much applies to being an entrepreneur and having a business plan. Because you have an idea for a business. You think it's a great idea for a business. You think it's going to be awesome. It's going to be successful. People are going to love it. You're going to find a marketplace. And you take it to maybe a few investors, or maybe just to people for their consultants, or maybe just other business people for their take on it, their feedback. And how do you process their feedback? When they say, this idea's never going to work, or they say the idea seems okay, but you got the wrong age group you're targeting, or whatever they say, you got to do differently. How do you? I'm just repeating your question back to you before I get to answer it. How do you know? How do you decide what to listen to, what to agree with? And by the way, with the recipe, we did do a lot of revision, probably as much as with The Go-Giver. I mean, and before we even took it to publishers, we did a lot of revision because I'd learned over the decade. And my finished stuff is more finished now than it used to be. But even after the publishers, we did a lot of revision. But so it's a really good question. Neil Gaiman, one of my favorite writers, the fantasy writer, says this beautiful thing. He says, when readers tell you this part doesn't quite work for me, they're almost always right. When readers tell you exactly what's wrong and how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. I think it's great. What it tells me is that when people read it and say, no, if there's something that they feel like it doesn't work, even if they can't put their finger on what it is, I need to listen.
Yeah.
I really need to listen. If they tell me exactly what they think should be different, I take it with a big grain of salt. So here are a few principles to answer that question, or to address that question. Stephen King, the writer, says this great thing about drafting. He says, when you write your first draft, do it with the door closed. When you write your second draft, do it with the door open. And his meaning on that is, when you write your very first draft, which is going to have lousy stuff in it, because that's the nature of a first draft. It's going to be rough. Yeah. It's going to be rough edges. It's the same thing when you're starting a business. If you make your first business plan, I don't mean detailed all the numbers, but your first business, your first plan for your business. Yeah. You do that first draft with the door closed, meaning don't tell anybody. Don't show it to anybody. Don't show it to your wife, your husband, your brother, your sister, your best friend, your consultant, your advisor, your financier, nobody. Because it's too delicate. It's too fragile when it's that germinal. It's like a insect that doesn't have a shell yet. It's like, or a newborn baby whose skull hasn't closed up. And that includes, don't even show it to your own critical self. Like, one of the things that kills most would-be writers is that as they start writing, they start criticizing while they're writing. You write a few sentences and you go, that's terrible, I changed that. Or you write a paragraph and you go, and you change it. If you do that, you'll never write. You'll never do it. Because every writer, the first few paragraphs, the first page, there's garbage in there. I promise you. It's true for me. It's true for everyone. You have to, ignore it. Pretend it isn't there. Just write as if it's the best stuff in the world. Put it down. There's time later to evaluate it, but now you can't evaluate it. You have to be in creation mode. It's the same with your business idea. Be in creation mode. It's the same with anything. Be in creation mode. Then later you can go back and look at it. Second draft, you write with your door open. And this comes to your question. Who do you show it to, and how do you deal with their feedback? The first question is really, really important. Who do you show it to? You don't show it to your best friend just because he's your best friend. You show it, you pick, and I'm really careful with my early circle of readers. I'll have 7, 8, 9, or at most. Maybe I'll build it to a dozen or 15. And I pick people that I really know, and I know that they read a lot, and they have a really good critical faculty. They know how to appreciate the strong points, but how to signal what doesn't work. I don't show it to people who I love, who I know are just going to tell me, oh, God, John, this is great.
Right, yeah.
I don't need to hear that.
No.
I like it. I want to hear it, but I don't need to hear it. It doesn't do me any good.
Right.
I show it to my wife. She's my best critic because she'll love it. I know she's going to love it, but she'll also tell me, the tone of this character is off. And she has told me that. So you need to find people that you trust, and you can only trust people over time. Trust is something built on experience. You can't trust someone you just met 5 weeks ago with this kind of input. And also, it's worth it to bring in experts. It's worth it to take in the viewpoint of people who are expert in this field, even if you don't like what they have to say. It's really, especially if you don't like what they have to say. Again, it's important to remember the specifics of the criticism might be wrong, but if there's a criticism, it would pay to listen because it may be pointing you in a direction of making this even better than it already is.
Like two things that you addressed there, of course, talking about making sure that you're giving your work, the early readers or whatever, whoever it is that you're talking to, if it's a business, if it's a book, whatever it is, making sure that those early readers are people that you can trust. You can love them, but you have to make sure that they will be able to give you the feedback that you need in criticism if that's what's necessary. I like that because I think so many people go out of it with extremes. They either go to the person that will always tell them yes, or the person that will always tell them no. And
Right.
Both of those extremes are very destructive to the creative processes, and as you were talking about. So I really like that point because I think that's something that just kind of needs to be reminded. People just need to be reminded of that, and who you can trust with certain things that you.
I'm going to pop something in real quick.
Yeah.
I have a friend named Scott who is one of my very best friends in the world. I love this guy like a brother. And I sent him the manuscript. I said the recipe. When I first wrote it, I said, "Hey, dude, you want to read this?" Mm-hmm. And he wrote back and said, I hate parables. I just do. I got to confess, man, I'm sorry to say it. I never read The Go-Giver. I can't. I hate parables. And I was so grateful because if I'd sent it to him and if I'd asked him to read it, what was he going to say? He said, "You got any military books?" And I sent him a manuscript of the next, sniper book I wrote. And he freaked. He loved it. But he couldn't read the recipe. It was not for him. So, it's good to know. Don't send your book or your business plan to somebody who hates that.
Exactly.
like you just said. Because you're not going to get good answers.
Right. That's a great example, actually. That's the perfect example of that negative side. But then the other thing that you talked about was what you decide to take with a grain of salt and what you don't decide to take with a grain of salt. I liked this specific, but also it was also I guess you could say it was confusing, but it was also kind of right on point in the sense that when people know exactly what's wrong, oftentimes it's like you said, it may not be as right, because a lot of times when people have pinpoint certain things, that could just be an opinion, that can just be like,
Yes.
I don't, like you said, like, oh, I don't like parables. That's just, a certain opinion that someone has. And so oftentimes when someone pinpoints a certain thing, it could just be an opinion or how they feel on something. But as you said before, with the person that doesn't know exactly what it is, but they know that there's something off, that's the person that you should really be paying attention to. And I really agree with that, because that goes back into like instinct. And that's a person that, like you looking, I know for me, like when I'm even going into a certain situation or meeting a certain person, it's that idea where you feel like there might be something off about the situation, or there might be something off about, whatever it is, whatever, person you're meeting. And so you're thinking, maybe I shouldn't continue with this relationship. Maybe I shouldn't stay in this place. And that same thing, I feel like it relates with that book, like with a book or someone reading this book and they're thinking, there is something off about it. I don't know what it is. And I think it's like the instinct, it's that gut feeling where it's like, it could be fixed. I just don't know what. And I kind of like that, because people often push aside that idea of like the gut feeling and like the instincts, because it's like, oh, it's just, it's not really real. It's just, little mumbo jumbo kind of thing. But I think it's very real. And I think that's something that really does need to be tapped into, especially if you're going to be giving something, someone to revise something or review something. You do have to take their instincts, their gut feelings in account, because those things they go far beyond just opinion, so I really like that you talked about that. That's a
really good point. The thing of instinct, listening to your instinct, is so important. It's something that I come to later in life, I think, in many ways. My wife is much better, and by better, I just mean more practiced. She's much more practiced at listening to her instinct than I am. And it's something that I've taught myself more or learned more in later years, where in early years, I would often just like plow ahead with my idea. I would let my ideas, like run over. Yeah. There'd be this little voice inside saying, I don't know about this. My ideas would be going, oh, who cares? It's going to be great. And it'd run it over. Right. But yeah, that instinct is so important to listen to. And you have to use that also in how you handle their feedback. People say this and that and this and that. And then you sort of you develop this instinctive sense of what they're saying, what it means, and what it means you have to change or whatever. My editor said that Spencer Johnson, who wrote The 1 Minute Manager, co-wrote The 1 Minute Manager, he wrote Who Moved My Cheese, and he was a delightful man. He recently passed away, but he said Spencer had this unique genius. He could give a book manuscript out to 100 people, and he would be able to hear in the 100 pieces of critique the one that he really needed to listen to and adjust. And I think I don't know if any of us will ever be as good as Spencer was at that, but it's a great skill to work on, is how to listen to critical advice without getting emotional, because there's great ideas out there in the world, better ideas than you'll ever have yourself, about what you need to change. That's why we need other people.
I love that specifically what you said, being able to hear, hundreds of ideas and still being able to take it in without being too, without letting your emotions take control. I really like that. That's something we are very insecure, kind of like people, where people can be very insecure, and we allow our emotions to often take control. When it comes to, especially things that come from our hearts, or the things that we put our work, all our blood, sweat, and tears into, and it can be very hard to separate emotions from, other people's opinions and ideas and thoughts. And so I think that's just, I like that you added that point, because I think that's really on point. And some people need to practice. I definitely believe like people do need to practice separating themselves a little bit, like when it comes to their emotions from critique and criticism. I like that you added that in there. So now let's finally get into the recipe and what it's about, your book, The Recipe. We've talked about a lot of things. We talked about the book, but now I really want to know and let my audience know, what is this book about? What's the concept, and what is the reason behind creating it?
Okay, so it's a story of, the subtitle is a story of loss, love, and the ingredients of greatness. And that's kind of the storyline there. It starts with loss. There's love is invoked, not romantic love. It's a different kind of love. And it gets to the ingredients of greatness. But it's the story of a boy, 14-year-old boy, Owen, who's just lost his dad, and his life is in turmoil. He's ripped up inside, angry at the world, getting in trouble. His life's kind of circling the drain, right? He's committing vandalism and about to get kicked out of school. And to pay for an act of vandalism he's committed on a property, he has to go to work for this crusty old diner chef in his cramped little diner kitchen, which he really doesn't want to do. And the chef teaches him lessons about how to cook, about food. And in the course of that, there really kind of emerges lessons about life. It's sort of like Karate Kid meets Master Chef.
I like that.
And so that was the premise. That was the idea of the story. And then that's the story setup. What the story is really about, it's about the chef helping the boy come to terms with his loss and kind of find his way back to a purposeful life and discover his life path. And it's also about the chef teaching the boy lessons about what makes for a great life. Not just the ingredients of greatness in a great dish, but the ingredients of greatness in a great life. And so in a sense, it's also a book about mentoring, because when you're dealing with someone who's hurt, and who isn't in some way, you can't just, say, hey, here's a principle, bam, bam, bam.
Right.
Get it in your head. Here's another one, bam, bam, bam.
Right.
To be a great mentor, teacher, guide is a delicate thing. And so it's a lot about that as well.
I love those. Just those little pieces of the book. I know when I was looking into it, I didn't get to read the full thing yet, which is what I'm going to be ordering.
Oh, I envy you. You have stuff you don't know yet in the book.
I'm so excited. And my main reason is I love reading like hard copy books. I'm more of a hard copy than digital, so I've been waiting to get it and to be able to read it. But as I was flipping through it and looking into what was it about, and then as what you were telling me just now, I love the different aspects of the book, things that are very familiar, I think, to someone, that's something that people can relate to, but also it's taught in ways where you can connect in a different way than you're used to, right? So I like the idea where you have it coming from this idea of recipes and cooking, and using that as like the central way of taking in the principles and taking in the nuggets of information and that those principles are the principles of greatness and those those different teaching moments. You're letting it kind of guide through as if it's just you're just teaching about cooking, but really you're teaching them about so much more. And I like that way of guiding a message, because I think that is really important. With people, we need kind of different ways of looking at situations, because people do look at things in different ways. And this could be very helpful for someone that maybe they're not just like, they don't take things in like very cut and dry. They take things in with a reasoning behind it. There's some other way of taking it. That makes sense. I hope that makes sense. But like
people want to hear stories. They don't want to watch a PowerPoint.
Exactly. Like someone like me, I really do. I take in messages and take in principles and take in advice in ways that I feel like I can directly apply to my life. So specifically with cooking, I love cooking, and that's why this book really stood out to me as well. It was because you can really apply it to something else in your life, and not just like that direct, oh, this is your life, this is how you fix it. Right. But more so it's going through like cooking and seeing how these things kind of relate and how they mesh together. And you feel a little bit more comfortable, and you feel like this is real, like you can really apply this, and it's something that you can relate to, which I really love about, I love that's what you're doing there. I also love what you're talking about, how you said it's about mentorship. In this book, specifically coming from the chef character to the young boy. Mentorship, I totally believe, is 100% important when it comes to any person, whether you are a grown adult or a little kid. Mentorship is so necessary for your growth, and being able to learn constantly from people and taking in their life stories and learning from both positive and the negative. I try to do that in my life all the time, and so I like that. That's a key concept in this book, the focus on mentorship and and being able to mentor well. I love that. So I also want to talk, or at least ask a little bit about, when it comes to this book, how real it is for you, like how much it connects to your life, or if it's based on your life, someone else's life. Is there any, I know it's kind of like a parable kind of book, but are there any aspects of it that really do connect to some your life?
I mean, it is a parable, like The Go-Giver is a parable, but it's a little more novelistic, kind of like The Alchemist or Life of Pi or something like that, where there's more detail to it and more flesh and blood and color to it in a sense. So it's a little bit more like a novel. And it's a piece of fiction. But at the same time, there are a lot of elements from my co-author's life, Chef Charles's life. I mean, there are a lot of characters in the book who are based on characters from his life. The main characters in the book are the boy, Owen, and the old chef. And there's a lot of Chef Carol in the boy, and there's a lot of Chef Carol in the chef, too, in both characters. The diner where a lot of this takes place is modeled on a diner that my co-author's dad used to own and used to cook in when he was a kid. And a lot of the accomplishments that the old chef has are accomplishments that the chef had, that our chef, a real chef had. Yeah. And a lot of of course, the cooking principles come from talking with him. And he has, the chef in the book has a card with 7 rules of the kitchen on it. You go to the book's website, you can actually download the card. The real chef has in his kitchen in Houston, Texas, he's executive chef of a big country club, and he has 75 employees and 3 kitchens and 5 restaurants. They put on like 80 to 100 banquet events per week. I mean, this huge operation. And every employee carries a little card in their pocket with 20 rules on it. And that's where, it was what I based that on. A little bit different rules, but some are the same. Yeah. So there are a lot of little pieces I got to borrow to dress out the book. At the same time, I also, while I was writing, I went back and forth from my kitchen to my desk because I actually did a lot of the cutting and the peeling and the cooking, and a lot of the stuff when we get into describing is the chef is teaching the boy how to chop onions or how to cut, how to peel carrots or do different things in the kitchen. I had just come out of my kitchen doing it myself, It's just, so there's a lot of reality based on that. Yeah. And then, just the principles, the key ideas of the story are ideas that are near and dear to Chef Carol's heart and also to my heart. We have a lot of the same, even though we're from very different worlds and backgrounds professionally, we have a lot of the same values and a lot of the same experiences in terms of what we've extracted from that and learned from that. So it's, both of our DNA is in there.
I love that. I want to get into a little bit of the principles now, specifically one essential principle, which would be that the ingredients of greatness. That's what a piece of the subtitle is. It says, the ingredients of greatness. And so in this book, I'm guessing that is a big part as you talked about before, it's a big part. It's not so much just about, how to be great, but also how to develop your life into something that can be great. So I wanted to ask, what are some of those ingredients? I don't want you to spoil the whole book for us, but what are some of those ingredients of greatness, those pivotal ingredients for greatness people can learn from the book?
So there's this, as I said, there's these 7 rules of the kitchen, which later become 7 rules for living and his recipe for living. And there are a bunch of others aside from those 7. But the key 7, he learns them one at a time. And the first, for example, the very first day. And by the way, every time I write something, there's a moment where, and it could be early in the process, or usually it's early in the process, where I'm writing something on a pad of paper with a pen, and suddenly it goes, oh, it's like, this exists. It's a sentence, or it's a piece of dialogue, or it's a paragraph, or it's a situation where I go, ooh, this thing has just sparked into actual life. And I can tell you in every book I've written at which point the book was born, or conceived, rather. And in this book, the moment where it came to life for me is right in the first chapter, when the chef, the boy meets the chef in there, and he's kind of gives him his first test. And his first test has nothing to do with cooking. It has to do with tasting, with eating. He sits him down in front of a hot dog and a Coke. And the boy is like, hot dog and a Coke, like that's the big culinary test, like whoop-de-doo, right? And the chef is like, just eat it. And the boy is, just disdainful and sarcastic. But anyway, he's eating the hot dog, and the chef asks him how it tastes. And he's like, it tastes like a hot dog. But he says, no, like really taste it. And so he has to close his eyes and really taste it. And this is no ordinary hot dog. I mean, this is something the chef has actually created in the kitchen. And in the course of that scene, the chef deconstructs the different tastes and flavors and spices and thises and that's in the hot dog. And he says, Owen, I could sit you down in front of a $300 meal and put myself in front of a hot dog. Which one of us would have a better meal? It would be me. Because I've learned how to taste, put my expectations and my judgments and get myself out of the way, all that baggage, and just really, really taste. And so the first principle that Owen learns over the weeks is to taste everything and really taste it. And that comes back again later in various ways in relation to cooking and also to living. It's, if you were, let's say you're a teacher, or let's say you're going to give a talk. Let's say you're a teacher in a classroom and your head is full of your subject. What makes you a great teacher is not all the stuff in your head. What makes you a great teacher is when you look at the kid sitting in front of you and you get that kid. It's like you experience who this kid is, who these kids are, who these children are, when you empathize with them. What makes you a great painter is not the skill with mixing pigments or how you use your hands. Those things are all critical. But what makes you a great painter is how you see, is what you see, is like your incredible passion for, oh my God, look at this and this and this and this. People often ask me, what's the secret to make improving your writing? Improve your reading. What makes great writing is great reading. And if you want to be a great cook, it's not about technique. Technique is fantastic, and there's lots of cool technique in the book. And you think about cooks we've seen on television on the Food Network and their dazzling displays, right? Yeah. What makes a great cook is somebody who really loves food, and that comes down to really tasting. So it's almost a Zen kind of thing. It's about genuinely experiencing every moment in your life and what's going on in that moment, not being in your head with expectation for what's going to happen an hour from now or mulling over what happened an hour ago, but actually experiencing the moment that we're in. That's the first rung on the ladder to greatness.
I love that particular principle. I think that is so in line with what needs to be done, as human beings, as we experience life. I think it is necessary that we're able to kind of separate, or at least see the difference between the skills that needed in order to be successful in life, and then what it is that we have and that makes us so capable of doing it. So you have these set skills that were. And honestly, actually, the way that you explain this really falls in line with the message of the podcast and of the UV effect, because you think about it, we can learn as many skills and we can, develop as many talents as we can in a lifetime. You can do hundreds of different things, but it's what we have within us. What are, those little gifts, those little abilities that we have within us that make that thing so special, that make that thing so amazing for us to be able to, whatever things we're trying to achieve within that particular talent, within that particular skill. It's what we have, what we can put into that, how we can put ourselves into that makes it so incredible. And so I love that point, because people tend to just kind of latch on to one thing that they think they're good at, one talent, like, oh, this is all I can do. This is all I'll ever do. It's the only thing that I love. And, I'm not good at anything else. I don't know anything else. So I'll just do this for the rest of my life. And what we kind of miss out on is that, it's not necessarily the skill. That's not the root of why this is such a special thing for you to do. That's not the reason why you love doing this. It's what you are able to do. What's how you're able to put yourself into that work. So like you said, as a teacher, being able to look at the students and understand the students and be able to curve their work and what they say, to not just to teach them, but to be able to reach them and connect with them. Yeah. As you were saying with the painter, it's not just being able to have that technique of painting, but to be able to see, to have that vision, to be able to, imagine things to put on that canvas. That, that not everybody can do that. And that's what makes it so special. And that's what makes you so special in that certain thing. And that's what really leads to that greatness. So I really absolutely love that point. And that really gets me excited to read the rest of the book, because you always hear like certain books that are like, oh, this is how you reach greatness and stuff. But that specific point, it really was in depth. That really, I think it connected with me a lot. So I think that's it's really on point. I love that.
Can I give you a quick example?
Yeah, definitely.
So I've been in a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews. So you're a great podcast host, and I'll tell you why. You don't just have a lot of stuff to say. You listen. It's like you actually listen to what I'm saying, and I know that because I'll say something, and then you'll answer it in a way that is really like building off of that. Yeah, not everybody does that. Some people like ask a question, they listen to the answer, go, then ask the next question. Right. So yeah, it's great, and it is. I think it's the key. It's like I said, the first rung on the ladder to greatness is to actually be open to listening, looking, tasting, hearing.
I absolutely love that point, and thank you.
You're welcome.
So I do want to. I have a few more. Well, actually, a couple more questions. One thing I did want to ask was for the authors that might be listening, or potential authors that might be listening, and they're looking at you. Only have been writing for, you said, maybe, was it like a decade, right? And
yeah,
around that time, and you've written over, this is your 24th book. That's quite an accomplishment. I think that's pretty incredible. So, I mean, being an author, it takes creativity, that takes a level of focus, that takes, as you said, being able to, be able to get people and get what people need to hear, and being able to reach within yourself and be able to put your own words and your own self onto the pages. So I want to ask, for all the authors that might be listening, what advice, I guess it's a basic question, but it's still a necessary one, but what advice would you give to a struggling author they're struggling to stand out? They're struggling to put their words in the pages with their own words, not,
Right.
instead of being distracted by all the other successful authors or all the other incredible people that are out there and trying to become them. Maybe they're struggling with just trying to get their own vision and their own words onto a page. How do you help them to stand out? What would you say?
Yeah. I guess there's so many things you could say, but I'll start here. First of all, I haven't been just writing for 10 years, because obviously I've been writing my whole life. But
Right.
it's been, so I don't want to give anybody the idea that I just started writing 10 years ago and popped out 24 books.
Right.
But it's been 10 years, 12 years, 14 years that I've been really in this career as a book author. Anyway, to stand one place where anybody can stand out, and this is going to sound very elementary, but is in making your writing excellent. Because of technology and the platforms available now, it's so audiences are so readily accessible, because anybody can write a blog post, anybody can self-publish a book, there's so much writing out there because of technology, which is a great thing. But it also has grievously lowered the bar. Because anybody can publish a book, everybody does. And because everybody does, there's a lot of not very well-written books out there. And it's true also of blog posts. It's true of online articles. There's a lot of material available that is not very well worked through. There may be lovely ideas in there, great ideas in there. So the first place that I would encourage any aspiring writer, author, is to develop, to work on your writing to make it excellent. I studied screenwriting with a master teacher many years ago. We're still in touch often. He's a great man, Hal Croasmun, Croasmun. He still running his school for screenwriters in Hollywood. It's all online, and he taught dozens and dozens and dozens of skills. But in his advanced class, he boiled them down to two. And one of them was, make your writing great, make it excellent. And that is to say, work on it every day. Be constantly looking for ways to improve it. Improve it, improve it, improve it, improve it. If you make your writing excellent, it doesn't matter what you're writing about, it's going to stand out. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what the style is, what the personality is, it's going to stand out. And by great, I don't mean extremely grammatically correct. Right. I mean, that's good. It's like painting. It's good to have technique and to be able to render an object faithfully. A painter needs that. In writing, you need to have a grasp of grammar and punctuation, and you need to understand how to do things according to the way they've been done. That may not be your style. You may have a very conversational style. You may have a very, free verse style. You may have a very extended, wordy style. John Irving writes in these extremely long sentences with semicolons in them that turn into whole, couple pages in a sentence. Kurt Vonnegut writes in sentences that are 2 words long. It doesn't matter. That's his personality. Yeah. You'll find your own personality as you go. But make your writing great. I read everything I can that teaches me, books about writing. There are great books about writing. There are many of them. I also read great writing. I don't read a lot in the genre that I write. I don't read a lot of parables. I don't read a lot of memoirs. I read a lot of crime fiction. I read a lot of mysteries. It's just what I love. Yeah. But I read the great ones, and I learn so much from them. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is to find at least one, maybe several outlets where you can practice your writing and put it in front of others. it used to be, and I started out writing editorials, 400-word editorials in the back of a magazine that I was the editor of. For 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, I was editing, and I would have this one little 400-word column. And that's kind of where I started crafting my writing, is in that little column. These days, it's blogs. You can start a blog where you may only get an audience of 20 people or 10 people, but that's okay. Because what it is you're practicing out loud. That's what my blog post is. I have a blog post. It doesn't have a ton of followers. I don't try. It's okay. What it is I'm like Jeff Dunham on stage with puppets. I am talking to myself.
Yeah.
Only I'm doing it on stage.
Exactly.
Having a chance to make a 400-word blog is a story with beginning, middle, and end. Find a short form, whether it's a newsletter or articles or blogs or anything else, that where you can practice making a complete finished piece that you can make as perfect as possible, and then just keep turning those out, and you'll develop your skill as a writer.
I love that. That is a really good point. That idea that the more that you develop your skills, like the more you put your work out there, even if it's in small forms, putting it out there and practicing, of course, always develops your skill level. I love that point. I also really love the point that you made. You said when it came to making your writing great. As you said, that might seem very simple, but I think the best example of that would be what you were talking about with The Go-Giver. How you initially put it out there and it wasn't great, and then you didn't get, those yeses. But the moment that, you heard about the revision, you knew what you needed to work on, and then you made it great. You worked on it, and you took things away. You weren't afraid to take things away and put new things in, and you worked to make your writing great. That's the best. I think that's, when I heard that it immediately related to the story that you talked about earlier with The Go-Giver. I think that is, as simple as it might sound, I think it's incredibly on point, because we do need to learn to look at whatever it is that we're creating and figure out how we can make it better if it's at the best of our ability. Because I think we always we either do one of two things. I think, at least for me, you either do one of two things, where you either look at something you created and think, oh, it's awful, I'm just going to throw it away, or you look at something you created and think, oh, it's perfect, it's fantastic. Or actually, no, you're right. It's about three, because then you have that middle section too. I think that's almost that middle place is where you think so. I think it's where we're in the place where you are it's not great, but it's not too bad either, and there can be some growth there. I mean, I think that if anything, that's a place that you should be, but then at that point, you have to work to make it, great. Yeah.
I totally see what you're saying. What I was saying is, it's easy to get a piece of writing to a certain point and say, hey, it's good enough. Okay, I'll let it go. At some point, you have to let everything go, right? Because you can keep improving forever. But some people who have watched me actually finish a book are very surprised at just how much revision I'll do. Over and they'll go over and over. You've gone over that paragraph already. Yes, I've gone over that paragraph, but it's like polishing a diamond. It's not done yet.
Yes.
It's just not done. Somebody asked Michael J. Fox once. I think he and his wife have 6 kids or something, and they had 5 kids, and then they had another one. And somebody asked him, "Why did you have? You got 5 kids. Why do you have another kid?" He says, "Well, we looked at our family, and it wasn't done yet." And that's how a book is. That's how a paragraph is. That's how a sentence is. If writing a book sounds daunting, of course it's daunting. Nobody can write a book. You can't sit down and write a book. Can't be done. But you can sit down and write a paragraph or a sentence. And, I'm working on the next Go-Giver book right now. And a couple of months ago, I blogged about this. I spent a morning working on the first sentence. And I'm really happy with the first sentence. It's 11 words long. In fact, it worked out that in the first four chapters, every chapter starts with a paragraph that's exactly 11 words long. I just like the rhythm of that sentence so much. But it took a while to get that one sentence right.
Yeah.
You know what? If you get that, here's one of the principles in the recipe. The chef says, pay attention to the little things. When you do, the big things will tend to take care of themselves. Yeah. And writing is like that. I might spend half an hour thinking about what verb I want in this sentence. Mm-hmm. But if I get this sentence just right, it's going to help the whole rest of the book get written.
Mm-hmm. I can completely relate to that, specifically even as a speaker. And I'm also I'm working on a book for myself as well. So I'm relating to a lot of things that you're talking about here when it comes to writing, because I want to make sure that, as I'm writing this book, I've only written one other book, and I'm writing this one. I'm writing because I know I can make it great, and I'm writing it because I have confidence in it. And that, like, specifically when you said that point of, like, making sure that, this book is great and that's how you stand out, like, that's how I'm looking at, this book that I'm writing. And that's how I look at, every speech that I write when I go up on stage, because I want to make sure that, when I'm writing this thing, that people are going to hear it and they're going to be able to not just think, oh, that's nice, but they're going to hear and be able to pull so much from it. They're going to hear it and say, wow, that's like one of the best speeches I've heard. That's like, I want people to be able to, look at what I create and to hear what I'm writing down, and to, hear what I'm speaking and see what I'm writing down and see how valuable, and see the kind of value that I see in it, So I love, and of course I love that point where, you taking that time to, not trying to rush yourself, look at each sentence that you read, each paragraph, and make sure that, you feel confident in just that sentence. You feel
that's all we're doing with our lives anyway, right? Is we're rewriting ourselves every day. And what do we have this whole life to live for? Is just to make ourselves a better version of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the rest of our lives.
And it's so, it just ties together so perfectly. So before we go, I just want to say this was a great interview. I love talking to you. I remember we talked before, and I love talking to you again. I loved our conversation. I think a lot of people, not just authors, could pull some incredible little nuggets, principles from this interview. And before we go, I do want to give you a chance to talk about where we can find your book, and if there's any other information that you want us to hear about.
Sure. That's simple. First off, there's my website, which is just my name, John David Mann, 2 N's, johndavidmann.com. And that's where I put everything. It's where my blog is, as I said, talking to myself in front of people. All my books are there. You can read excerpts, download sample chapters, find links to buy them, and etc. All my information is there on my site. The book, the recipe, is up at Amazon. It's a hardcover, ebook, audiobook. I read the whole audiobook myself, days in the studio. It was nerve-wracking, trying to do different voices to actually be Jeff Dunham for a few days. But I wish I could get him to do it. That would be great. So that's where the book is. And you can buy the book anywhere, but it certainly is on Amazon. And you can go to my website. And I hope you enjoy it. And in the back of the book, there are 14 recipes. They're actually recipes for the dishes that the people in the story cook in the course of the book. And we're going to get up on the book's website some videos of me and Chef Charles doing some actual cooking there, too. So
I love that. We'll make sure to have links to your site and to where they can find the book, the Amazon link down below, as well as links to any social media that you have. We'll make sure to have that all down below so you guys can definitely check this out. I recommend checking out the book. I'm going to be ordering it on Amazon because I love hard copy. And thank you so much, Mr. John, for being on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope to have you back some other time for sure.
This is getting to be a tradition. I love this. Thank you. I love spending time with you, and I'm sure we'll do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the UV Effect podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Mr. John David Mann. If you're listening to this on my website, GabrielleJordanInspires.com/the UV Effect, be sure to go scroll down below and check out all of Mr. John David Mann's links. Check out his book, The Recipe, as well as his website and his social media links. And while you're here, be sure to leave a comment letting me know how you liked this episode, what you learned, and anything else you want to share. Also, if you are listening to this on iTunes, SoundClouds, or Stitchers, leave a comment and subscribe as well. You can also head over to Instagram and follow us on our IG account, The UV Effect, and check out posts that we'll be posting, the quotes that we pulled from this episode, as well as sometimes some fun things that we post on that little snap feature, the little, I guess, like the 24-hour snap feature. I don't know what it's called, but you can check us out there, follow us there, and be a part of our family, our UV Effect family. And once again, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you will be here next week on Tuesday